Hi, but you can just simply call me Amazon. Not like the American company or the forest in a South American country, but the Swedish car. Yeah, a Volvo. How Swedish of me. So I recently checked how old my PlayStation account is. That's the very first console that I owned, and a wave of shock hit me. Late December 2010, around Christmas. That's well over 10 years by now. That is when my father helped me create that username I told you about earlier. This all got me wondering what got me into gaming in the first place. So I've always loved and played games, and I'm sure you have too, because, well, you're here after all. I have been hitting buttons for fun for, well, as long as I can remember. It's probably my favorite hobby. Lego games are the first games besides some small and simple browser games and the topic of this video. I will be talking about what I like to call the first generation of Lego license games. Lego Star Wars 1 and 2, the complete saga, which I for some reason count as 3 different games, and Lego Indiana Jones and Lego Batman. So let's get to it. So during the Steam summer sale, I went kinda crazy and I bought a couple of my old favorite Lego games on Steam. Mainly just to have, so I can see them all in one place, in grid view on Steam. And if I ever decided to play them, I had them. Well, I downloaded them all to try some of them. I always used to play these games on the family computer with an egg clock set to just about an hour or so, just so I wouldn't get some computer sickness or my eyes wouldn't go square. I settled down in my chair in front of my own computer and readied my setup by moving the keyboard to the center of my XXL mousepad. I hovered over the list of Lego games, and after a bit of contemplation I chose my old favorite, Indiana Jones, of course. I pressed the big green play button and waited for the soundtrack to fill my ears, but then dark. My whole setup just froze over. Center monitor black, except for the taskbar with the game logo just taunting me. The stupid YouTube video playing in the background for a couple more seconds behind the still thumbnail from the video. It died. No blue screen, just like some kind of a blackout. Turns out these games are old. Really old. Older than my first console I told you about earlier, kind of old. Lego Star Wars came out in 2005. I was barely even 4 years old by then, but now I had to play at least a couple of these old gems, so I did what most people would do and I went and downloaded a PlayStation 2 emulator. I found a weird site with a black and red theme that downloads games at about 6 bytes per second, and after a couple of minutes to set up my controller in the emulator, boom! I got it working. Sure, it was in a 4:3 resolution, probably in a really low one, but I didn't really care. I heard the stupid Lego sound of the in-game menus and the literally overpowered soundtrack of Star Wars. I started a new save, I saw the old hub world that was, well, laughably small and barren, but it had worked. But something was off. What about all those other games that I had bought for my own money? Well, as it turns out, I did care. The authentic Lego experience for me has always been with the keyboard. I always played it with a keyboard as a kid. The concept of a controller for gaming was honestly very foreign to me. WASD UHJNK. So I got to work. I now felt very strongly about getting the real deal. I dragged my dying hand-down PC from the mid-2010s out of the corner it was sitting in, unplugged the nest of cables, and I opened it up. Like an ancient tomb from Indiana Jones, it was filled with dust, ancient artifacts, and snakes. Well, maybe Strike the Snakes. After I reseated my RAM, blew out the mountains of dust, and prayed to God for it all to work, I started my PC. Waiting patiently for what felt like days. But there it was, the BIOS. Shit still works, I guess. I opened up Steam and rushed to start Lego Indiana Jones and... well, was not going to give up now. I searched the holy grail of information, the internet. There I looked through a couple of Reddit posts where I came across a lot of people just telling me to update my graphics drivers. Because of course, that's what they always tell you. It's basically the default. But even then, I opened up the GeForce Experience app and I saw a new driver. Top of the page, new. Well, what could go wrong? I had to try at least. And so I did. And guess what? Reddit was right somehow. It just worked now all of a sudden. No hiccups, started fine, full screen, full HD, no problem. So I started playing. And now that we're actually playing, let's just talk a little bit about the games. The first generation of movie tie-in LEGO games are all linear action adventure games with simple puzzles and are best played with 2 players. That was the short version. The 5 games mentioned before all go by the same formula when it comes to level design, combat and puzzles. A small hub with a shop where you can purchase characters and vehicles for using free play after completing a level. You can also buy sheets and put in cheat codes. The hub world is also where you choose missions or levels. In the Star Wars games, there are 3 movies per game, if you're not the complete saga of course, which has all 6. These are all represented by doors. Behind these doors you can find the individual missions or levels after choosing a level by walking into one of these doors. In the other 2 games, Indiana Jones and Batman that is, you just walk up to a map and press a level. After this, a small cutscene will play and it will lead directly into gameplay. Most missions are very linear levels filled with different enemies, maybe 3 different types. Every room you walk into is almost always a puzzle of some kind. These are always just very simple and you just kind of smash things together and you're done. A lot of these levels also feature a platforming section of some kind. These are almost always brought down by the camera, which is for some reason often in a very bad perspective. Very hard to see and you kind of just have to guess your way forward. Some of these look pretty cool and feel pretty cool, but they're all pretty bad. Some of them kind of just end while others have a boss fights of some kind. All of these boss fights are almost always really bad and not challenging at all. These games also have at least 1 vehicular level of some kind. These are almost always bad, although there are some great ones, like in episode 3 of the first game, the battle for Croissant. For example, I had a lot of trouble with this one as a kid, but it was really fun and it looked really great. It was really hard because of 2 things. The controls on the vertical axis was inverted for some reason, and if you played with 2 players, if one of you died, which was very easy, you had to restart the whole section, and one section could be from 30 seconds to 3 minutes. So it was very, very, very frustrating as a kid. But even now I can still struggle a little bit on some parts. Even though this level is pretty hard, it's still great. On the other side of the spectrum, however, is a very bad vehicular level from episode 2. Still in LEGO Star Wars 1. It's very hard to see what's happening. It's from a top-down view and the controls are really bad. You just fall into random holes everywhere. My personal favorite level from all of these games has to be either the last level of the first game, LEGO Star Wars 1 that is, which has a spectacular flip on the 2-player concept by flipping it on its head. You're now working against your friend instead of with him or her. My best friend and I love to play this level over and over just to do that last fight against each other. Another used to be favorite was the tank level in Indiana Jones from the 3rd movie. I played this one again recently and I guess it was kind of fine, but man, it was just underwhelming. A little over 2 hours in playing a bit of every game, I had to step back. Filled with nostalgia, that amazing feeling, but also this weird feeling of, I don't know, it was not amazing or perfect. I get that it wasn't going to be the greatest game of all time. I didn't have much perspective of what a good game could be back then. I had never experienced the great story and branching side quests in the world of The Witcher, never experienced the frankly overwhelming amount of fun and gameplay in Doom. I had never done any of the puzzles in Portal 2, for God's sake. I didn't have any idea what a great game could be. I had no perspective. But a LEGO game is a great start. Not much story, simple mechanics, and fun, inviting visuals. The game had some really great and expressive animations. Every character has their own animations, which is really fun. The fight animation looked really cool and clean for the time, although the combat is as shallow as a puddle, with the boss fights basically just being a simple puzzle and doesn't have any stakes. The music in all of these games are awesome, but it's also not original. LEGO games are almost always just licensed games. The sound effects sound dated but fine, but I do still love the old style of the dialogue though. It's actually really funny. I didn't know English at the time, but I still kind of understood it, even though I just kind of wanted to shoot stormtroopers and Nazis. Man, I don't know what I was expecting to happen. I guess I was just ready to feel like how I did over 10 years ago. That unconditionally happy kid sitting in front of the family PC. But in the end, it was just fine. Well, LEGO games were just for kids after all, and I had just turned 20. If you think about it, the games were basically just ads for LEGO anyways. Well made and full of quirks and secrets, but still ads. Perfect for that kid that loved both LEGO and games and had both on their wish lists that year. Honestly, a perfect gateway drug into other games. But I kept playing, all the while looking back at what has been, hearing the soundtracks, the effects, and this all made me realize that I'm not a kid anymore, and that's very hard for me to come to terms with. To be completely honest with myself for once, it kind of hurts. I don't really struggle with that stupid flying level in LEGO Star Wars anymore. The puzzles in LEGO Indiana Jones are barely even puzzles. The platforming in LEGO Star Wars though, that's still stupid. Now, all I can feel is nostalgia, melancholy, and regret. But in a good kind of way. My childhood was really, really good. Great even. But I can never go back. And honestly, I regret not enjoying myself more